Let's react to the newest Dallas Stars head coach, Glen Gulutzan's introductory presser.
You're Locked On Stars, your daily podcast on the Dallas Stars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, Stars fans. I'm Joey Erickson, former producer of 105 Through the Fan. Please be sure to subscribe. We are free, available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. And as always, thank you so much for making us a part of your day and making us your first listen. Glen Gulutzan is back, and his introductory press conference took place today as he gets reacquainted with the Dallas Stars media. And we're here to break it all down on today's episode of Locked On Stars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. I'm going to share some snippets with you with some of the highlights from the presser from Jim Nill and, of course, Glen Gulutzan as well. So much to dive into on this Wednesday edition of Locked On Stars. Be sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell, never miss an episode of Locked On Stars, rocking along with you every single day here during the off season. And my overall thoughts on the Glen Gulutzan presser before we hop into some of the quotes and highlights. I thought it was a big win in a lot of ways. He said all the right things. He talked about the importance of relationships. He talked about the roster and how good it is and how he's not coming here to reinvent the wheel. He just needs to make a change, a degree here and a degree there. He talked about his first time in Dallas, almost 14, 15 years ago, and how Jim Nill was basically right on kicking him out at that time. And he has scars on the wall. He has skins on the wall. He talked about that a lot, how he has learned from his previous mistakes, and he's learned from the 5 or 6 head coaches he's been with under the Edmonton Oilers, during his time in Calgary, during his time in Vancouver as well. A lot of good things and what you want to hear if you're a Stars fan from Glen Gulutzan. And I saw many of you on Twitter saying you weren't very high on the Glen Gulutzan hire, but this press conference sort of shifted your viewpoint a bit. And maybe you're starting to have a more positive outlook on what Glen Gulutzan can bring to the table. And as I mentioned yesterday, there wasn't like a can't miss hire when the Stars fired Pete DeBoer. So it was going to be a tough decision for Jim Nill, but we'll go ahead and hop into the first quote I want to share with you, because Jim Nill really explained, I think, once he met Glen Gulutzan for the first time to start this process, it was kind of done immediately after this. And here it is from General Manager Jim Nill.
Here they lose out. They got to fly back home, and the next day I'm calling him and getting permission from Edmonton to interview him, and I need to get him down ASAP. He agrees to come down, and we had an interview, and I was so impressed for a guy that was devastated after you lose, how he conducted himself, how he spoke about situations. That really impressed me, because I know we're going to go through that, and he's got the scars because of it. And it was so impressive how he conducted himself, how he talked about his team, the situation. Not easy to do when you just lose. You go to the Stanley Cup Finals, that's not easy to do. And in the end, that was the thing that really brought me to him, and I was very impressed, really impressed.
And Jim also brought up character. And we all know he's a high character guy from the players that he acquires and brings into the organization, and of course, coaching staff. And Glen Gulutzan also had a lot of high praise for the coaching staff that they have assembled now with Neil Graham. And it seems like they have a relationship that goes way back. Elaine Nazardine, of course, as well. And we'll touch on how he sees that coaching staff and where they can make some changes heading into next season as well. But Neil mentioned character. And I don't want to say this was a shot at Pete DeBoer, but we all know and understand that Pete DeBoer has had some issues in relationships. And of course, we know what just went down with Jake Ottinger. And there was a great article from Robert Tiffin as well, starsthoughts.com. I really encourage you to go read it in its entirety, and talking about how Pete DeBoer is that veteran-minded head coach where maybe if he healthy scratches a guy, he's not going out to seek them and have the conversation about maybe why he's making that decision or what he wants to see from that specific player. Whereas Glen Gulutzan probably is. He's just sort of a younger, more modern player coach where he is going to have some of those conversations, and he has the respect of some of the best players in the world. And yes, that includes Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid, who he brought up and mentioned that is probably going to go down one of the highlights of his entire career, having the ability to coach them. And now he gets to use that respect and use that knowledge to bring to the bench of the Dallas Stars and dealing with players like Mikko Rantanen, who make a lot of money. I'm not saying Mikko Rantanen's a diva, but they all have egos. I think to some degree, each hockey player at this level has to. They have to have a bit of that delusion that, my crap doesn't stink a bit. Otherwise, they wouldn't have gotten to that point. But you have to be able to deal with those situations and adapt and change. And Nill brought up character, and it's not just X's and O's, because it's hard to win in this league. And they were asked, is it a Stanley Cup final or bust? Or is it a Stanley Cup or bust? And Nill said he has too much respect for the league to kind of view it that way. And, as fans we look at a lot of the organization differently and what we want from the Dallas Stars, of course. Like last season, it was Stanley Cup or bust in a lot of ways, but they can't have that mindset as an organization in a team. And I thought Glen Gulutzan did a really good job of explaining his thought process on building to win a Stanley Cup, because if you set the bar as like our season's a failure if you win the Stanley Cup, well, you're already selling yourself short in a lot of ways, because it is so dang hard to win. And we've seen that here in DFW over the last 3 seasons. Like, it's extremely hard. And one team finishes the season how they want it, but they brought up that there's 8 to 10 teams that are realistically Stanley Cup contenders or can win the Stanley Cup. And Glen Gulutzan said Dallas is one of them. And if you ask anybody else around the league, Dallas is included in that group. So I think it's going to be really, really fascinating to see what transpires here over the summer. I wanted to get to this before we jump into some more of the style changes in the roster and what Glen Gulutzan's thoughts were. But he was asked a really, really great question about how Glen Gulutzan said Jim Nill was right for kicking Gulutzan out, like 14 years ago. What makes him right now?
I've got over 100 playoff games now, and or around 100 playoff games. You kind of lose track, but those playoff games you might as well be 5-1 because everything is dialed in. You've got to make adjustments. I was a younger guy. I didn't make many adjustments. I knew one way to play. All right, I knew one way to play. You're self-taught, you're self-learned. Now you bring in all that experience. You check a lot of boxes. So players are the most important part of this game, no question. It's not us coaches, but you got to learn how to deal with them. You got to learn how to motivate them. You got to deal with star players. You got to deal with guys that are getting 7-8 minutes a night. So you have to deal with all those situations. And the guy 12 years ago, he never dealt with them. This guy's dealt with them for the last 12. So that's probably the biggest difference. I've checked a lot of boxes.
I love how open he was about some of his misgivings or some of his weaknesses from a decade ago, and about how rigid he was. And we talked about that the other day in one of our episodes on Locked On Stars, and my Glen Gulutzan deep dive, I believe that was out on Monday or Tuesday. I've done a lot of episodes here this past 6 days. We've truly been going every single day here on Locked On Stars, but talking about how he was so rigid and he wanted continuity with his line so much, and he's willing to make adjustments now. And we even saw that with Pete DeBoer the past couple seasons as well. He wasn't afraid to shuffle up lines, and you have to be comfortable in doing that. And this sort of goes back to what I mentioned in that episode too, when you go through the ranks as a coach. And he kind of alluded to this when he was with Texas and the AHL and the ECHL. You become so single-minded because, well, this is how I've won, and I'm going to do it this way. And I loved how he also mentioned every system has won a Stanley Cup, from the Vegases to the Floridas to the Tampa Bays to, whoever. Every system has won a Stanley Cup. It's about them finding the right system that fits the roster and the Dallas Stars. And we're going to discuss more of that in just a moment. Today's episode of Locked On Stars is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center so you can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Takeout or subscriptions that can add up to more than you expected. Sometimes we're paying for all these different streaming services. Maybe you're not using some of those streaming services anymore, or you're eating out too much and you can cut back there. Monarch Money will help you dial in on the details so you can budget and save smarter, and you can save up for that trip you're wanting to take with you and your partner. That's where Monarch Money can take control of your finances. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Let's jump into some snippets of Glen Gulutzan talking about the Stars roster and where he feels that he can make some changes to the way the Dallas Stars play. It was funny because he was initially asked this by Leah of Dallas Morning News, and he's like, I'm not going to get into some of the specifics. And then a bit later on, he did kind of dabble into some of the more specifics on what he wants to see from the Dallas Stars here over the next season. So some really, really good stuff here. First up, this is the changes to the style, or maybe his coaching philosophy, and how he feels the Stars can play.
What's changed with me is I'm going to look at our roster deep with our coaches. We've got great coaches here, and I know that throughout the league. We're going to take a little deep dive in here. I'm not coming in. Listen, I've played every system. I've worked for 5 different coaches. I played for every system, and in every system has won a cup. Vegas' system won a cup. The way Florida we all seen has won a cup. All right, everyone's been able to take it. We're going to put together a system collaboratively with that group that's what's best for us. What's best for us to push us. Now, I've got a couple tweaks in mind. I'm not going to mention them, but at the end of the day, we're going to put something together that's best for the Dallas Stars and the personnel we have, and that's probably one of the things that's changed with me. I only had one way to play. There's not just one way to play. We're going to put it together that helps our group.
He also went into some of the more, details of what Neil Graham and Elaine Nazardine are going to be handling. As expected, Elaine Nazardine will deal with the defense in the penalty kill. And he mentioned Neil Graham is going to take on the responsibility of the forwards and the power play a bit. I would imagine Glen Gulutzan's going to have some say in what's going on special teams, specifically the power play, just because that's where he's been kind of dubbed the specialist in Edmonton over the last 8 seasons. So it feels like it's going to be a really collaborative process, which I like as well. And not saying Pete DeBoer wasn't very collaborative, but I feel like we never heard Pete a lot really diving in and acknowledging what Elaine Nazardine and maybe Steve Spott and some others were doing on the coaching staff. And Glen was very complimentary of the coaching staff. And look, he's not going to bash anybody. Maybe it's just coach speak at the end of the day. It is his introduction. He's got to play nice with everybody, but it feels like it is going to be this real collaborative process. And that's also something Glen has sort of learned to add to his coaching style or philosophy here over the last decade or so. So again, he's going to tailor whatever system he feels fit will best suit this roster. And I also think that is a significant change, maybe not significant, but a bit of a change from DeBoer in the way we're just felt like, look, we talked about a lot. The Stars they kind of got stubborn. They kind of became one-trick ponies the last postseason where, well, we're just going to play, decent enough defense, and if we get scoring on the power play, we're going to win because we're not going to do a lot off the rush. If we can capitalize on the power play, do well in special teams, and Ottinger holds us in, like, we're going to win a lot of games. But when it came down to the final four and the rink gets a bit smaller and your dancers have to sing, your singers have to dance, so to speak, they weren't doing that. And this goes back to what Gavin Spittle brought up when we spoke with him about a month ago, when on ESPN, Pete DeBoer said, we don't play that way. We're not built for that, for going after anybody on Edmonton for what happened to Rope Hintz. Well, you have to be. You need to be able to adapt and become that team if you want to get into the Stanley Cup final. And Glen Gulutzan touched on this as well, about how it becomes sort of hand-to-hand combat. But first, let's hear Gulutzan's thoughts on the roster that he is going to acquire.
I love the depth hikes of this team, the depth, because if you're going to go all the way, you need depth, and you guys have witnessed it. I grew up that way a little bit in Edmonton the last 7 years. We didn't have it, and then we did, and it's propelled them to 2 Stanley Cup finals. Played Florida. You can see their progression over the 3 years, and just adding those layers at the end with the Marchands and those types of players. That depth helps. It's here. It's here in Dallas. I love the D. I love the goaltending. You got studs on D, studs in net, and depth and strength up the middle. All the pieces are here. We just have to make sure we're pushing this thing 1 degree. I mean, this isn't a 20-degree league. The team had over 100 points. You're not going to come in here and reinvent the wheel. But if we can push this thing in certain areas 1 degree, I think that's the biggest. That's going to be our biggest challenge as a coaching staff.
So some really good stuff there as well, and I think he hit the nail on the head, like he did with many of the questions today. Wasn't too serious as well. He was joking. There was a nice lightheartedness to the press conference as a whole. And the more I think about it, and yeah, it was not super thrilled with what the Stars did yesterday, but to be fair, the Stars were hand tied. And because of the LTIR situation last year with Miro and Nils Lundqvist, the Stars were able to really stack this roster because of the LTIR money and the retention of Mikko's salary for this season only. So the Stars were able to do a lot with this roster, and now they're going to have to try to do that again next season. But you just look at it as a whole, and you're thinking, okay, we're going to get a whole year of Mikko Rantanen. Like that's exciting. That's an improvement from last season. And I know Gulutzan mentioned he loves the D. And I'm sure many Stars fans got some chuckles out of that. But even if you bring back Lyubushkin, Dumba, like there's still some players there. Of course, with Bichel, you're going to get a full year of him, you would suppose, in the NHL. Lundqvist, he improved a lot last season, and maybe with Glen Gulutzan, he gets a bit longer of a leash. Maybe he will get to play some bigger minutes and have an opportunity to really seize the opportunity, under Glen Gulutzan, because let's face it, I don't think Pete DeBoer was a huge fan of Nils Lundqvist during his tenure here. So there's still a lot of good pieces, and that's one of the things I think all Stars fans have to realize too. Like this team isn't, I wouldn't say they're worse than last year. Are they worse from where they were 2 months ago? Yeah, but they were able to do that because they were able to circumvent the cap with the LTIR money and stuff. Like you have to get back below the cap now. So they're going to have to rebuild the roster. This team, they haven't tanked, right? It's for the most part, they are running back quite a bit of what they had over the last a few seasons. And I think Stars fans just pump the tires a bit. I know we're all really frustrated with what took place in the Western Conference Final again, but the Dallas Stars are still a really, really good team. They're not awful. I feel like it seems like we go through this cycle. It's like, oh, the Stars are awesome, and then they lose. It's oh, well, they're not going to make the playoffs next season. It's like, okay, like I think barring injuries, Stars are going to be just fine, and they're going to be in the mix again for a Stanley Cup. Now, some of the more specifics on what Glen Gulutzan would like to see out of the Dallas Stars, pretty much everything Stars fans have been looking for. And he kind of just said the quiet part out loud in a lot of ways about some of our shortcomings with Pete DeBoer. So we'll touch on those in just a moment. So a bit earlier, I talked about, and you heard from Glen Gulutzan in that one quote. He's not going to touch on some of the specifics. And then he was asked a bit more. He's prodded a bit. And here's one thing Glen Gulutzan would like to see about the Dallas Stars, because he was asked, you've beat the Stars the past 2 seasons in Edmonton. What's the secret there? How can you bring that over to the Lone Star State?
It really becomes almost hand-to-hand combat when you get to the finals. The game changes, and any player is going to tell you the game changes over. It's different from 82, and then it's different start in the first round of the playoffs. But boy, you get to the finals and you're playing in there. It becomes, I would say to our players, it becomes everything your dad used to tell you. You know, when you played, you guys have hockey dads in here. You know, you got to back check, you got to forward check, you got to shoot the puck, you got to get to the net, you got to win the battle, you got to, you know, it doesn't become X's and O's. It really, you got to make some adjustments because some teams do things a certain way, but boy, the adjustments become smaller and smaller because it's hand-to-hand combat. So what I'd like to do here too is right from the start of 82 is we just got to up our physicality a little bit, 1 degree through 82 games. And because you can't just turn that switch on in game 83. You have to build it in. So we're gonna build it in, and we're not gonna be running around. We've got too good of a players, but there has to be a little element of physicality. The way we forecheck is going to change, just a little bit, so that we're better prepared in the playoffs for game 80 through and on.
I love the way he phrased it as well about physicality, about building it in from, you know, game 1 to 82, building that into the game, because y'all know I hate I hate the physicality conversation, the discussion just for the sake of physicality. I don't know. I just not a big fan of, oh, let's just run around, just throw giant hits, like open ice hits. And like, I understand that it can be beneficial, but physicality for physicality's sake is just not a good thing, because you can run around and lay some big hits. And I think there is some of that the Stars need to have, but at the same time, like, Stars are skilled, and if they're going to have the puck on their stick, they're going to have to make plays. And if you're running around, you're trying to just be physical for being physical, you can take yourself out of position, you can tire yourself out, and it means you don't have the puck. It means you're probably not, you know, in scoring opportunities or in, you know, creating scoring chances, but building it into the game because of the flip switch, right? Whereas Dallas gets into the Western Conference Final, and maybe they need to put that switch on. They just don't have it. And I love the way he phrased that about being physical and building that into their game. And that was something he mentioned that is one thing he would like to change, so they are better prepared for the playoffs. And I think we can all get behind that. Physicality's every offseason is going to be, if the Stars fall short, it's always going to be that, right? Teams just have to get tougher. You have to be built like the Florida Panthers, which is pretty much impossible to do. The Stars are not going to ever play with that level of physicality or nastiness in their game. It's just, I just don't think that's the personnel they have. So it's about finding the right system. He also mentioned, I think he touched on earlier, changing the way they forecheck as well. So there's going to be maybe a different style philosophy on how they go about their business in the offensive zone, which I think will be a welcome change. And maybe just by the way they forecheck, that will sort of change their physicality and how that is sort of reworked, and how they maybe approach that physical nature of the game. Because again, like I've always pushed back, like you can't just be physical to be physical. And it's also really hard to do that when you're trailing in every game, like the Stars pretty much weren't they? Didn't they trail in 85% of the game? How many playoff games they played? I think it was 19, maybe it was 18. They were trailing like 15 of them. It's just a hard way to live. But really, really enjoyed the way he phrased that. And that was the final quote I had for you today. Just thought it was a really, really solid presser from Glen Gulutzan. Again, looked more prepared and confident, which is to be expected after being behind a bench for now over a decade. And he touched on the scars. He's checked a lot of boxes, and I think he's going to bring a positive impact in the dressing room with the relationships with Jamie Benn. He touched on how, he coached Jamie back when he was with the Texas Stars in the playoffs, and he's sort of kept that relationship going, which I think is also a testament to how players see him. The fact that Jamie Benn still has talked to him on a bit of a regular basis, year in and year out. And, hockey's a small world, of course, once you get to that level. But I just think it's a really telling hire about where Jim Nill is hoping the organization goes to. I think Glen Gulutzan is sort of ushering in that era of what Jim Nill thinks and is a recipe to win Stanley Cups. Look at Paul Maurice and the type of coach he is. And not saying Glen Gulutzan is him, of course, but just that he loves his players. Relationships matter. And not saying that, DeBoer had some of that, but I think Glen is more of that modern era of a head coach that can understand players maybe a tad better than coaches, that are 10 years older than Glen at this point, just the more older style. And I'm really excited and curious. Again, I mentioned that, and I haven't been like all gung-ho about the Gulutzan hire, but y'all know I like to see the positive in things and be optimistic. I could be really, really boring, or it could be really easy for me to come on here and just crap on everything the Stars do. But that wouldn't be fun for me. And I don't think it'd be fun for you guys as well. I like to keep it positive, look on the bright side of things. Because we can't do, a whole year of just being down and out about. The Stars are still a really good team. It's going to be a fun roster, even with maybe some of the lack of changes that are going to be made the next, few months. Maybe they're rolling with what we got right now currently. And I think you're going to see some elevation of some players. Like, Sam Steele could be like playing in your top six. Johnston could be playing wing. Like, there's a lot of interesting things that could take place. And I'm looking forward to what this staff, Glen Gulutzan, Neil Graham, and Elaine Nazardine can put together as a staff, because it feels like and sound like it's going to be this nice collaborative process. Maybe this is exactly what the Stars need heading into next season. So really, really strong. I think it was a win for Glen Gulutzan. I think it was a win for Jim Nill as well. And usually it is like Jim, we can have conversations about where we disagree with some of his moves. Like, didn't love the Foxa move, but we all know Jim, for the most part, he gets it right. He makes the right decision. He gets it, and I'm willing to roll with that. So it'll be a fun few months, that is for sure, to see how it all starts to take shape. But that'll do it for my reaction to the Glen Gulutzan intro press conference here today. Hope everybody enjoyed it as well. Hope everybody is enjoying a fantastic week so far as well. We'll be going to the lake here for 4th of July, which will be a lot of fun. But we'll have a few episodes out before we kick you off into the weekend. Be safe, by the way. Let's all come back next Monday with 10 toes, 10 fingers. Have fun, of course. Enjoy the sun. Hope you enjoy some good hot dogs and burgers on the grill if you're at a lake, or just enjoy time with your family as well. But we'll be back for another episode. Look out tomorrow or Friday. We'll see. I've been kind of cranking these out late. I'm pretty proud of myself for that. But be sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Never miss an episode of Locked On Stars, and we'll see you next episode. So long, Stars fans.